Hey everybody, it's Charlie from Daily Motor, and I've been spending the last week with the Volkswagen ID.4. For 2024, Volkswagen has made a few changes to their all-electric compact crossover in the hopes that it will be a little bit more of a normal car. When the ID.4 came out, it tried to do a lot of chasing of the Tesla Model Y because it was one of the earlier models in this sort of electric compact crossover sphere, and it provided a lot of compelling spec sheet arguments compared to a lot of the models on the market. But it was frustrating to use. The infotainment didn't work too well, a lot of touch haptic controls, and overall it took what is a really good car and marred it with difficult and frustrating to use interior bits. Now, admittedly, Volkswagen with their ID models have kind of aimed them more toward owners and less toward journalists. So if you get in the car and only spend a little bit of time with it and expect it to function like many other vehicles, you're often frustrated and disappointed. But if you're an owner of a car like this and you spend a lot of time, you customize it, you get comfortable with how it works, a lot of people have been pretty happy with them. So for 2024, Volkswagen gives you an updated infotainment system, a little bit more range, slightly different power and range figures, but overall a very similar package here. So we're going to go over some of the changes, and we're going to go over a little bit of how I struggle with the Volkswagen ID.4 and have since the first time we got one, some of my frustrations with it at this price point, as well as some of the things it does really well. You're looking at it here in this Arctic blue metallic paint color, which matches the sky remarkably on a gray day like today. It's looking a little more gray than it is blue. That plastic cladding down below telling you that it is indeed an SUV, even though it certainly has the ground clearance and height of something more like a car. This is the rear-wheel drive Pro S model, meaning it's one away from the most expensive version of the ID.4. You can get this one about $52,000. And I'm not going to dig into pricing too much during this review because here in June of 2024, electric vehicle pricing is all over the map. I can tell you what the MSRP is of this car compared to an Aria, compared to a Model Y, compared to an Ioniq 5, but what you actually need to do is, depending on your market and region and incentives, you need to go into an actual dealer and see how much can you pay for one, how much could you lease one and then buy it right out afterward. There's so many different options for paying for an electric vehicle these days that it's really difficult to just look at the window sticker and say, oh, well, this is how much this car costs, this is how much you're going to pay, because that's really not the case all the time here in at this time of 2024. And also, I don't know how many times I've gone to open the trunk of this car and it hasn't opened properly. It's little tiny frustrations like that that have made it difficult to enjoy my time with the ID.4. Not the lowest load height given the size of vehicle. It's about mid-thigh. Not too bad, I should say. It is a fairly multifunctional trunk area, though. The ID.4 really optimizes its space well compared to some of its competitors. You can see we did some things with the trunk this week. And actually, what was useful with the trunk is we put some planters down here. You can see the dirt. I really ought to vacuum this out before I give it back. And we had this false floor kind of put like this so that the plants were sort of held in and kept them from tipping over. It was nice to have this false floor because you can put some things underneath it, like that little bit of charger there, and you can sort of mount it up like that when you need to, and then you can take it all the way out and have a little bit more load floor height if you needed. And then even further below, you get a little bit of an underfloor compartment, so you actually could have your charger way down there, maybe some emergency bits, but unfortunately you're not getting a spare tire, so better get yourself a goo kit. The rear seats fold 60-40, but then you do have a center pass-through if you're putting something like skis or, I don't know, 2x4s, some long items. Again, a good way that the ID.4 is maximizing its space. Little door handles that don't actually come out. You just put your finger underneath and press a button and the doors pop open. I like the interior materials on the ID.4. I do. It's a synthetic leather, but it feels nice. It's got an interesting smell, admittedly. And you got pockets behind each of the seats. That's nice to see. Closing this, at 5'10", I do fit pretty well. There's a nice recline to the seats. That recline is not adjustable, but they're soft. We do have a center flip-down armrest with some grippy cup holders. Power points back here, as well as air vents, and a little bit of storage right there, and storage in the door. So it's a nicely functioning and well laid out rear. In fact, I'm even seeing our little phone holder pocket. So this is a nice place to be back here, even as an adult. Definitely a lot more space than something like our Chevy Bolt EUV, but even some of the competition, the direct competition, doesn't have as well laid out of a backseat area as this ID.4. You can see our big panoramic sunroof. However, unlike a lot of the other vehicles, this one has a sunshade that'll come and cover it. I don't love how it's not a full, thick sunshade. It's just kind of a mesh cover, but it is certainly better than those vehicles that just have a fixed glass roof and don't give you any way to block the sun or dampen the echo. Unlike some of the competition, you're not getting any frunk storage here in the ID.4, so if you pop the hood, you simply get a hood, or an engine compartment, if you will, although there's no engine. So we've got some drive motor action and batteries and the actual bits that all cars do need, but certain cars cover those up and make it seem like it just runs on magic fairy dust. Lighting has been pretty good on the ID.4. It's got nice adaptive headlights that swivel a little bit and good visibility in the dark. And in these Pro models, you get light up grille lights and badges and a light up light bar in the rear as well. Coming into the front, you can see we've got 2-stage memory seats as well as massaging seats in this model. 4-way lumbar adjustment actually, and 10-way adjustable power seats. Getting in, as soon as you get in and it senses your weight, the vehicle turns on. If you press the brake pedal, the vehicle turns all the way on, is ready to drive. However, there is a stop-start button on the side of the steering wheel if you wanted to turn it off or on manually. You can see some of the changes here with the infotainment system. I actually have a dedicated breakdown of this 12.9-inch infotainment touch screen that you can see in the link below. It shows you how it works, maybe some of the differences from the previous model. It responds really quickly and the screen refresh rate is nice. Of course, we've got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto coming up, so that's been really nice to have. I don't love that the climate controls are baked into the screen here. Yes, it helps that the screen is more responsive and it moves more quickly, so sometimes when you're starting up the vehicle it only takes a second or two for you to be able to get into the climate control screen. It's just not as nice as having real dedicated climate control buttons. And you do have temperature at least, but even having to click in for fan speed and press things a few times, it's subtle. But I would still, we can't just let manufacturers continue to get away with cheapening out the interiors of cars without at least calling them out. I don't care if it's not that bad. We still should be demanding and expecting to have cars work better than they could, if you will. A lot of touch controls in this car. You've got touch sliders for volume. You've got touch haptic controls on the steering wheel. Twice in my week with the car here, I've accidentally turned on the heated steering wheel control when I was turning. I accidentally hit it right here, and steering wheel heat is on. I've had to turn it back off. Oh, 1, 2, 3, there we go. They haven't optimized the space super well here in the center console. You see 2 standard size cup holders, a little bit of a wireless device charger there, 2 USB-C ports for both data and power, and then a fairly small center console. But this is a giant plastic area here, and yet this is the only storage we get. I don't know why there's not a deeper storage well up underneath here. It's not like you need a drive shaft running through the center of the vehicle. So I am a bit disappointed that there's so much dead space. There's a little bit of a pass-through right here, but it's not large enough to put something like a purse, and anything you do put there is going to fall out as soon as you take a corner. So I like how a lot of the competitors have built in a nice, very usable center console area with more controls. You do have piano black around here, which probably isn't going to look great on this side that you hit regularly, and any time that you scratch this up with your fingernails or keys or anything that you put in there, it's going to not look good after a good amount of time. But like I said, I do appreciate the squishiness and the nice feel of all the fake leather bits around the cabin. Small complaint, perhaps something that you get used to owning the vehicle, is that there are only 2 window switches. So in order to do the rears, you have to tap there, and then the same controls do the rears. It's subtle, but it's again, when you're going from a normal car, I say one with 4 window switches, to a car with 2, it just requires a little bit of extra thinking. And the fact that sometimes when you tap it, like that, and that, and that, it doesn't actually switch. So there's a little bit more deliberation. It slows down your movements, and you got to think a little bit longer just to do something that should be a second nature sort of functionality. But again, maybe if you owned it for a few weeks, then it would become second nature. The car does have built-in navigation. Admittedly, most people are simply going to use their Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but it's got the type where it'll show you chargers located along your route. So if we do something like navigate to San Francisco,
Okay, San Francisco, California. Drive safely.
It's going to calculate the route. And baking in right here, it's already going to show us charging stops. You can see that it's expecting us to drive for 53 minutes. No, sorry, other direction. It's going to expect us to drive for 35 minutes. Wait, it's not seriously thinking that we should stop right here and charge, is it? No, I think it's saying, yeah, you're going to drive for 132 miles and then charge for 35 minutes. And then you're going to drive another 200 miles, roughly, and then charge for 18. And then you'll be there and you'll be able to charge up at a level 2 in 53 minutes. So this is even better than the Hyundai Ioniq 6 that I took on that 700-mile road trip that would slowly figure out charging stops along my way. It had to ask me to add them and everything. And then would have me charging to 100% each time, rather. This car is actually saying, oh, you're only going to need to charge for 18 minutes and you'll get on your way. So it's nice that they have that baked in right there. Pretty darn good navigational system. Me personally, I'd still probably be at least checking a better route planner to make sure that I'm using the best charging stops and it's going to factor in elevation, everything like that. But I bet you if you own the car, you use the navigation for a while, you'd find it works pretty well. All right, let's get the ID.4 on the road. We've got a nice column shifter. I appreciate that Volkswagen's done the column shifter because it keeps this center console nice, free, and free of clutter. And check this out. Look how good the turning radius is on the ID.4. It sounds weird, but this has been one of my favorite things about this car is how tightly it turns. It changes the way that you think of how you can navigate around your city, because there will be situations in which I have to street park this and I can just whip it around super tight within 2 lanes, pull into a parking spot very nicely, maneuverably. And a lot of cars in this class cannot do that. My wife's Bolt UV, very poor turning radius. Another thing I appreciate about driving the ID.4 is that it does have a very subtle low-speed electric sound under 20 miles per hour, but I like the sound better than a lot of the other manufacturers. It's very subtle, goes away after 20, and then this is a pretty quiet car inside. Decently powerful as well, but interestingly, it doesn't give you 100% of the throttle, I should say 100% of the power as soon as you press the accelerator pedal. It sort of ramps it up quickly after about a second or two. So rather than that yank your neck back immediately sensation, it's more of a gentle but firm thrust. And I think some people comparing EV to EV, it's going to make the ID.4 feel a little more sluggish, but in the real world, it makes it a smoother driving experience both for you and your passengers, and it's probably easier on the drivetrain components as well if we're talking about a longevity sort of standpoint. Something I do really appreciate about driving electric vehicles that you do not get here in the ID.4 is one-pedal driving support. Now, you do have 2 different drive modes. You have D and B will give you greater regeneration to sort of slow down without using the brake pedal, but in order to come to a total stop, you do still have to apply pressure on the brake pedal. And I understand that for certain situations, they wanted to create more of a conventional internal combustion car driving experience. But why not give us the option? Most people I know who have adapted to one-pedal driving in an electric vehicle vastly prefer it over conventional 2-pedal driving. It's a simpler way to drive, to simply take your foot off the accelerator pedal, the car comes to a stop, regens as best as possible, and then you continue on your way. You barely have to move your foot. Why didn't they do that here for the ID.4? I understand. They could have had D be just a normal driving mode without one-pedal driving, and then B give you full one-pedal. Maybe they have some sort of reason, but most electric vehicles have it at this point, so it's frustrating not to have it here in the ID.4. Fortunately, you do at least have a brake auto hold, so as you come to a stop, put your foot on the brake firmly, it will apply the brake and hold it there until you press on the accelerator pedal again, but I'd rather have conventional one-pedal driving. And it's interesting, if their justification is in order to make it feel more like a conventional internal combustion car, why did they choose that hill to crawl up for feeling conventional, but yet they did so many other things about the interiors of their cars unconventionally, and they expect drivers to acclimate to such a smart infotainment system and these haptic controls and everything, but then try to give them a conventional driving experience? That's a bit strange to me. The ID.4 does give you a very simple center gauge cluster right here. It gives you pretty much just the information you need. You see your speed readout in digital, you see the speed limit, you see a little bit of navigation, you see which gear you're in, and your cruise control, the battery percentage, state of charge, and the distance to empty. And I like that. I like how it's just a nice, simple, functional gauge cluster right there in front of you. Gives you that information, not too much more. It's nicely fit below the steering wheel, kind of in it, if you will, and it moves with the steering wheel. So if you're short, it goes down there. If you're tall, it goes up there. It's not something where the steering wheel begins to block it. Sometimes I'm driving my wife's Bolt EUV around and it gives you the power readout in kilowatts. And part of me is like, oh, that's kind of cool. But another part of me is like, okay, who buying just a simple compact crossover SUV like that really cares about how many kilowatts their motor's putting out at any given time? You wouldn't get in a standard Chevy Equinox or a Trax or something like that, and it's not constantly telling you how much horsepower you're making on the gauge cluster. So getting back here in the ID.4 with just a simple meter kind of telling you, okay, you're giving acceleration or regen, I think that's a smarter way of giving you some sort of power readout. Here we are, June 2024, and the compact crossover marketplace for electric vehicles is crowded, and it's getting more and more crowded every month. You've got vehicles like the Tesla Model Y, one of the best-selling cars out there right now. You've got competitors like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 that can charge really quickly, that gives you a lot of, maybe not the most advanced technology options, but a very well-optimized interior and some great electric motors. Then you have options like the Nissan Ariya, which, yes, costs about the same as the ID.4, like I said, MSRP, but I guarantee you go into a Nissan dealership and there's going to be multiple Arias sitting right there on the lot. You're going to be able to pick your color and your trim, if you could keep the trim names separate in your mind, and you're going to be able to walk out with an amazing lease deal. There's larger offerings now, there's smaller offerings, there's more and more competition than ever, and the ID.4 does a lot of things well, but you got to be able to really differentiate yourself from the competition in order to stand out, and there's not much the ID.4 does that actually stands out. It's priced competitively, its feature set is competitive, and its driving characteristics and interior cargo space and everything, they're all competent, but at no point in my time driving the ID.4, other than maybe the turning radius, have I experienced anything in this car that really blew my mind, that made me think, oh wow, this is heads and shoulders above anything else in this competition, in this competitive set. Take a few other Volkswagen products, for example. First off, the upcoming Volkswagen ID. Buzzz. That vehicle is going to be so unique in its the entire automotive marketplace that there are many shortcomings that I'd be willing to overlook simply to get into that vehicle, just because it's cool, because it's functional, because there's an emotional aspect to it. There's so many reasons why I'm interested in a vehicle like the ID. Buzzz. Whereas something like the ID.4, well, yeah, it's neat and fine and all, but there's tons of other options out there, and I'm probably going to shop mostly based on what sort of deal I can get more than anything else. Then look at something like the Volkswagen Jetta. Something we really appreciated about the Jetta is we drove a model that cost about $21,000 and still did most car things very well. It got great fuel economy, it drove competently. Yeah, the sound system wasn't very good, but we liked spending our time in the Jetta. It made driving simple, pure, easy, and relatively enjoyable. Yeah, that is a tandem road bike. That's pretty cool. My qualms with spending time with the ID.4 have been that, yes, it does a lot of the core elements of being an automobile really well. Things like the driving dynamics, the acceleration, the braking, the turning radius. A lot of the core car things are done really, really well. You can tell it's built by a manufacturer that's been building cars for a very long period of time. My frustrations come into my interactions with it, with the infotainment system, with the window switches, with the steering wheel, with the ergonomics in the center console area. They're very, very small nitpicks that take a competent vehicle and end up turning me off of it. But admittedly, I am the problem here. I am a journalist who gets to spend time with many, many different vehicles, and because of that, I have a natural affinity for anything that's simple and just works. Whereas somebody who does really like the ID.4 for various reasons could get used to how the ID.4 works and then end up appreciating it as a daily driver vehicle. I will say, one of the biggest downsides of the ID.4 is its sound system. At this price point, it might very well be the worst sound system that I've ever tested. one of the only other really bad sound systems came in the Volkswagen Jetta. But in that car, it was a $20,000 car. So I was more willing to forgive subpar audio experience because they offered the Beats system in the higher trim Jettas. So not the end of the world. It's really bad. It's bad to the point where even when I listen to podcasts, I think it sounds weird. So that's unacceptable in my eyes at this price point. But other than that, the ID.4 is competent. It does a lot of things well. It's just in this marketplace, in this period of time, you got to be doing even better to really demand people to buy your product. And then there's the aspect of, because it doesn't do anything electric vehicle-wise remarkably stellar, it doesn't have something like 350 kilowatt charging like one of the Hyundai Kia products, and it doesn't have any amazing electric motors or anything like that. It's not super remarkably efficient. It's just simply competent. It does decently. You also got to start comparing it to gas vehicle options, and considering this one costs $52,000, you can get yourself into something like a Volkswagen Atlas or a Tiguan for quite a bit less, and unless you've got really cheap charging at home or at work, I mean, you might be fine off just getting a gas car and saving the cash and getting an electric vehicle here in a few years. But before we wrap up our review, we got to put the Volkswagen ID.4 Pro S on the Daily Motor leaderboard. Right now, we've got two EVs leading, the Kia EV9 and the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Then we've got the Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro in third place. So again, this is my subjective list. This isn't me saying, oh, this car is better than that, objectively speaking, or you should buy this over that. It's me, my time that I've spent with the vehicles, how have I enjoyed them, and what has really stood out to me. I'm really sorry to do this. This again, I don't think this is necessarily reflective of the product. I mean, we drive a lot of good cars. I mean, even look at the very bottom, Mercedes GLS 450 and Land Rover Range Rover. Those are both still good cars. And CX-50, I like the CX-50 in general. It's just that Meridian trim was not good. So the new car market, the margins are very, very slim here. But I, at $52,000, am putting this one right here. Fourth from the bottom, 16th place right now, the Volkswagen ID.4 Pro S. And again, it's just simply the fact that while it does so much decently, it's competent. It's going through the motions. There's nothing wrong with buying a Volkswagen ID.4. But for me, it doesn't really stand out as something that'd be amazing to own. It doesn't really stand out as something that is amazing to drive or anything. And it executes its purpose pretty well. I think that's the thing it does best in terms of our three pillars of evaluating a vehicle, is it does execute its purpose of being an electric family hauler pretty well. You need to transport multiple people in an electric vehicle for decent amounts of range. The ID.4 is competent. So there we are. Volkswagen ID.4 Arctic Blue Metallic. Let me know in the comments if you think the changes for the 24 model make it more compelling. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.